Welcome to the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. I'm DaRon.
And I'm Roniel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and also like this video.
So I'd like it if we could discuss a little bit of something that has to happen within almost any professional field these days, and that's reporting, especially writing a good report, what makes up a good report, and writing a report that's either not great or doesn't provide much of any value to whomsoever is reading it or is supposed to be using it. If you do me a favor, can we talk a little bit about some of the major trends and concepts first that are pervasive in the security field tied to report writing, and then we can discuss a little further.
Are we talking the concepts of the different styles or different things that are trending now than what it did back before? Because as of now, as I've seen, and remember before, a while back, you didn't have this thing called an attack narrative. Now, I don't know where, to me, I'm starting to see that it may have could have came from the OSCP or a different thing, because those introduced those things, but I didn't see them back then in the reports. So now you're starting to see that you're getting attack narratives being added, and you're starting to see that they're separating out your web application pen test from your API pen test, and all these different things to separate to make it look like you're doing more than what you're really doing. And in some ways, it may be cool. It may be cool to use it, because if you don't find anything, you can explain why you didn't find anything. But I really think it's doing a little bit too much, especially if you have a details finding section and then you also have an attack narrative that actually outlines that whole detailed finding section. It doesn't make sense, especially if executives don't really understand what they're looking at. That's why we have an executive summary, right? You have those things laid out for executive, and a lot of times they just ask for the summary and not the technical detail. Right. But the things that they're doing now kind of doesn't make sense, because your executive is not going to know what the heck you're talking about, no matter if you're mapping out a story and reading books. And how many executives read books?
Right. Well, and to that point, so really, it's a know your audience kind of deal, right?
Yep.
There are two major audiences for a lot of these reports. When I do any of my digital forensics work, for example, I actually have two separate reports that go out. One is an executive report, and the other is a technical report. The executive report being a very small subcomponent of that technical report. And then the technical one is the one that, your eyes roll into the back of the head as you read it kind of deal, right? But that executive report gives you just the bare bones, in and out. Here's what happened. Here's the time in general. Here's the impact. And here's how to fix it. Usually on one page, and it may splay out into part of the other page. It's that simple. But that's for forensics, and that's different. And then, of course, you have the appendices that have supporting data of importance from the logs. But
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but from that penetration test perspective and from an assessment perspective, there are different styles to writing these reports. And you're right, the attack narrative seems to have become a common style, and that style, I think, was largely pushed by the OSCP. I remember back in 2011, I think it was, where they were pushing that heavily way back when. Honestly, it's unfortunate to me that is catching on, because there's nothing, I don't see what it buys.
I think it buys baloney.
Yeah.
Okay, think about it. If you look at the OSCP template, the attack narrative turned into the details and attack narrative section. So when you're going and reading that, you're reading it as a story on what they did and how they linked and chained these vulnerabilities together, but it's also the detailed findings. So now you're seeing in reports where they have attack narratives and detailed findings. Like, it's overkill. You have a ton of stuff And it's like you're repeating the same stuff I've already said.
Right.
Now, even though in the technical details, I kind of go over a little further of what I did, then I would go over the narrative. But if you really look at it, I got everything I needed to know from the attack narrative. Why do I have to look at that? Or if I have everything in the detail finding, why am I going through that? It's just, I like reports that are straight to the point.
Right.
And if I was an executive and I had a company that I own and you came to me with a report, I want you to get straight to the point. I want to understand what the issues are. How do we fix them? And, and leave it at that. But I mean, you're going to give your technical details to the people that need to understand it. But my goal is, I don't want this. I don't have time to read all of this crap. What is the issue? Okay. And that's why I think that a lot of these, the way they're making these style of templates or reports are just kind of fluff. You're fluffing up, like you say about fluffing up your resume. Mm-hmm. You're fluffing up to make it look like you did more than you actually did.
Right. I definitely agree. And there, as you say, there's really not much beneficial data in it. And because it winds up being duplicative, I would argue it actually becomes confusing. And management doesn't understand anything you're talking about anyway. They don't get it. They don't care. What they want is a quick summary. And so I always learned you have a very quick summary. Before your summary, you have an introduction. And that introduction, so you've seen some of my assessments, some of the reports from assessments. That introduction goes through and it states the perspective that we were using when we were looking at it. So we were looking at it from a malicious insider and nation state perspective and this and that. That way they understand why they have some of the findings that they have. And then next comes in a really quick summary that winds up telling them, okay, you had X number of low, moderate, high findings, and your overall risk is whatever it happens to be, and bam. Then after that, it's just finding. And for each of the findings, you give that detailed explanation of both the finding with some examples, and then the recommendation.
Which, again, I like your style of reporting. And as you knew before, when I really didn't like a lot of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But, that was the only thing I knew before I started seeing or getting used to doing code snippets or the code examples. And I can add in my request and response, which made it a lot easier because I could show what I really did instead of trying to take this picture, cut to this picture, then cut to the next picture to actually tell the story. And that's how the attack narrative is. It's a bunch of pictures trying to tell a story. So my thing is, I really like to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Like you said, like yours is pretty simple, straight to the point, and there's no fluff in it. But nowadays, I'm not saying every company doing this, but nowadays you'll see that. Now, with that, not only are you watering down your report and fluffing it up, but you're also starting to see that people can get away with lower skill sets by fluffing up a report. So you don't really know if they're really good at what they're good at because they're just fluffing up shit to make it seem like they did something when they didn't, especially when it comes to network penetration testing. How many times have you seen a network penetration test lately that has maybe 3-4 findings? And then they miss a ton of other things, but they got 3 or 4 findings. They used the attack narrative to show, hey, we did this tool, we used that tool and this tool. They used a whole bunch of tools, but only found 3. Right? So to me, like I said, it kind of waters down a report, but it also helps the consultant who may not be as skilled to get away or hide behind the report. But then again, when you really go and do the readout calls, quote unquote, or the post engagement calls,
right?
Then you will kind of see whether they actually know what they're talking about. But again, a big part of doing the report is not just popping shells and showing how cool you are. A big part of the report and this whole engagement is to help the customer figure out what the problems are and coming up with a solution to help them.
Right. That's exactly right. The focus really is supposed to be not on how great you are because you attacked it in this way and that way and you did all this craziness. They don't really care about that. All they really ultimately at the end of the day care about is number one, how to find instances of this vulnerability, and number two, how to fix it. So when you focus instead on things like this attack narrative, I would argue what you do is you take away the focus from what the customer cares about and you put it into trying to Hollywood up your report, right? That,
Hollywood.
yeah, that doesn't do anyone any good. Well, when I was doing this engagement, I sat there and I put on my hoodie and I drew the strings tight so you could just see a little circle here. I sat in my basement and I started typing in all of these words and numbers started flowing across my screen because I'm that awesome. It may make you feel good about yourself inside, but it doesn't help anyone and it will just make everyone who reads it think you're a blowhard.
So that is a really good point. Like I like that face. You sure you wasn't trying to be an advertiser or probably be a model on one of those advertisement commercials?
Yes.
Like you definitely could be one for Cisco or somebody. Like, but either way, I just wanted to piggyback off of that. Like, you're right. I think that is a good analogy to say that again, they want to show how cool they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know that hacking is not as cool as it may look in the movies.
Yeah.
It's not as quick as it looks in the movies.
Unless your system's bad.
Right. It's a really boring process. Like imagine, anybody ever thought about what a application security person professional does? Like you sit and watch. I'm not saying that's all, but just give an example from a web app penetration tester that they do so much. You're sitting and looking at Burp Suite proxy, looking at requests going through all day and then fuzzing the hell out of them if you're a fuzzer type person or trying different things. And this could take a long period of time unless you actually know what you're doing or what you're looking for. But if you show that on a movie, probably fall asleep.
Yeah.
So hacking is not as cool as people think it is, but it is a fun thing. You can do cool things with it, but it doesn't look as cool as it does in the movie.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was saying it gives you that perception, like when we were talking about with bodybuilders.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly right. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great profession, but I think the best analogy is it's like doing a 1,000 to 5,000 piece puzzle, because that's what it really is. It's a big giant puzzle, and as fulfilling as it is for you, number one, there is drudgery in it. Number two, it takes a long time, and number three, nobody wants to film that shit.
Right? Yeah, no. Nobody wants to do
it. And so instead, what you do see is you see this. So long ago, there was a big trend toward trying to have tools that would produce these reports. Your scanners produce reports. And I actually saw a lot of people using the scanning tool reports as the report that they hand to you. And some companies still make that mistake. You should never ever do that. There are a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do it, to include the data is generally way too generic to be useful, both the vulnerability side and the remediation side, the mitigation side. And then it reads like it's a canned report, and nobody likes that. If they're going to pay you huge amounts of money for something, you want it to seem like it's something that they couldn't get from a scanner, because hopefully whatever it is you did is something that you couldn't get from a scanner. It's more, you provided that, it's called value add.
Yeah, because if I'm paying you 120 grand for a whole year of an assessment or engagement for all my products, and you're just slapping me with a Nessus report that I could have did myself, then what the heck am I paying you for?
Right.
I'm paying you to find things that my scanners won't.
Right.
And that the hackers will.
Right.
So that's what separates the difference from a really, really great penetration tester or security consultant or contractor, whatever you want to be, freelancer. That's what separates them from the guys who just run vulnerability scanners and then say, hey, that's what we found on Nessus and we're going to slap this on the report. And how many times do you see that on a network assessment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's insanely common.
I'm not saying you don't see stuff like this on maybe a AppSec, assessment.
Right. They're
Because
using web
seen,
scan and stuff.
right. I
App
have seen
scan.
people do that or
Yeah.
burp scan. They'll slap that and say, here's what, no. And a lot of those times, those things are false positives anyway.
Right. Right.
So, you want to be able to be unique. You want to give a different perspective to the client and find things that nobody's actually finding, which is what I like to pride myself on doing, is trying to find unique things that you didn't even think were there. And sometimes they may not always be the most craziest things like our favorite deserialization, but they are very unique and they can cause some serious issues. So I think that it's a common thing now to Hollywood up your report.
Yeah.
Every year it changes. Every year I see something different or new that I'm like, wait, what is this? Like, when did we start doing this? This just wasn't happening before. And like I say, I just think it's because like information security, AppSec, all of this penetration testing, all of this assurance, everything, compliance, all of it starting to be watered down.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of good consultants, or there's not a lot of great penetration testers out there anyway, or just great infosec people, period. So you think about it, what's the ratio in this field that you would say given to the between the good and bad, like you would do in computer science? There was a ratio between good computer scientists and bad computer scientists. What would you say that ratio would be here in our field?
Honestly, I would say less than 1% are decent.
Yeah, and you see, that's the problem. So if you think about it from a company perspective, and I'm just trying to think about it in their way, if you think about it from the company perspective, what way can I, or how much value can I give to the client without letting them see or them knowing that we are not, I don't want to say it's not as good as we think we are, but we don't have the people, the workforce to actually give you the value that you're worth. So that's what, I see it as. And maybe, like I said, maybe I'm over, that, or maybe there's something, it may be a little different, but that's the way I see it. Because like I said, on a lot of engagements I've been on, I would be with another person doing an assessment and they would miss tons of things. And they're seniors. They're senior consultants. They've been doing this for years.
Right.
But they rely heavily on tools.
Right. Well,
and go ahead.
I was just going to say, so one other thing that really complicates it is you also have to be very good at being able to write and convey your point and why something's bad. And this is really what separates the good from the bad, etc. You have to be able to provide meaningful mitigations, meaningful remediations, and meaningful actions that they can do to resolve whatever the issue is that you bring up. Because the worst thing that you can do is hand someone something that has a whole bunch of problems and zero practical, reasonable solutions.
But a lot of people don't, and that's another thing where, as you just stated, a lot of people that are consultants don't know how to remediate. And a lot of them don't even have a development background to understand what they're looking at, which is why we go back to what I was saying. Yes, you have to know how to write, you have to know how to do these things, but you have to know how to give good, practical remediations and understand what you're looking at. So you have to understand the underlying, architecture or, platform or framework that you're actually attacking to be able to get good, information or feedback to the client. So like I've known, like just watching you, I used to say before, like when we were at Highland, how you would give a remediation. Somebody, one of the developers would say, no, I don't think this is going to work for us. Then you come back with another one. That may not work. Then you give them another option. So what made it so great about you was that you could give them a multitude of different options that they could utilize. So it wasn't like, hey, if input set, sanitize your input and do it this way and blah, blah, blah. And well, we can't do it this way. Well, that's the only way you can do it.
Right.
Right. No, there's other ways you can do things. There's always another way to do something.
Right. Right.
You got to give them options.
Right. Well, and I've seen stuff where someone dogmatically says, "Oh, well, don't allow any HTML," for example. It's like, well, that's not practical. Don't you know what this system does? If you tested it, you would know that's not reasonable. You need to figure out a solution that gives them what they want without having the vulnerability. And so you have to work with them, but you'll see so many times, oh, well, sanitize and validate your input and don't allow this, don't allow that. But they need to allow this thing. Tell them how they can do so safely. Work with them. You're not supposed to be adversaries. Your point and purpose is to aid them. If they wanted someone who would just demolish them and walk away, they'd ask the Chinese to do it.
Well, then why are companies starting to move towards that adversary field? Because a lot of them are starting to move towards that area, but that's not what we are.
No, it's not. And that comes from that whole APT baloney, the idea of this, well, you've been compromised, and you've been compromised so badly that you don't even know you've been compromised, and there's no way that you can prove or disprove that you've been compromised because they're that good. Talk about a logical fallacy. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? Because you can give no evidence that satisfies and refutes the claim in question. Zero.
So now that we talk about the advanced persistent threat, what's so advanced about the attacks that they're doing, please?
Nothing.
There's nothing advanced or new under the sun that I have seen that is considered an advanced persistent threat. The difference you can say about some of these things that are going on, especially as criminal organizations, is they have a lot of time and money.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Most people may not have that. So they have a lot of time and money to do the things that they want to do. In this particular case, talking about an advanced persistent threat, there's nothing advanced that they're doing. They're doing the same stuff to you. And the companies keep doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
We have not learned yet that not to put our credentials in our code.
Right.
Don't leave our code credentials in the code. How many times have it been said and you've seen on the news that somebody got hacked because they had credentials in their code and it was stored on GitHub?
Right.
I mean, companies have not learned yet. Now, do they care is the question, but they haven't learned that. And neither do they probably have a good security program or posture. So, right. And they probably don't pay their security people or security folks or take them serious. They probably don't pay them well. So my thing is, there's nothing advanced about advanced persistent threat.
No.
There's nothing new. There's nothing that they're doing that's so sophisticated that you can't do.
No.
And I wish they would stop that.
You're right. It was a marketing term designed by a government contractor to win contracts, and it's been very successful. It's been incredibly successful. And unfortunately, it has spread as a term, like many marketing terms. And now everyone talks about it. But as someone who does a lot of digital forensics on government systems, highly sensitive government systems, I can tell you I've seen this stuff from China and Russia and Turkey and Iran and Israel and so on and so forth. I've seen organized crime. I've seen nation state. I've seen lots of stuff from various mobs and so on and so forth. There's nothing advanced about any of it. I've seen the US's stuff. Nothing advanced about any of it. I mean, let's be honest. Everyone's gotten a peek at Stuxnet.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has a peek of all the botnets.
Mm-hmm. That's
I
right.
mean, it's like if you disassemble what a botnet is and how it's constructed, it looks, first of all, the code is just a bunch of blue shit put together. Okay, it's not developed very well, and no majority of the malware out there aren't.
Yeah.
So when you really look at this thing, it's hackable, it's not secured, and it's not as complicated as you think. You know, if somebody just had a good understanding of how to write, you know, a client and server application or different stuff like that, you would know how to write a Trojan.
Right.
You would also kind of get an idea of how botnets work. But most people don't understand that. So since they don't understand how to code or how coding works or how things work and how they were built, they think this is so magical. Oh, it's so advanced. It's way above our. It's not advanced. It's not. It just took a little creativity to say, oh, if I do this, maybe I can do that. I mean, some of these tools were used as system administrative tools, like they were admin tools,
Right.
and people took them and made them into something else. Like, what was it? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Netcat used to be an admin tool, right?
It was marketed as an admin tool, so was Back Orifice and Back Orifice
Yeah,
2000.
no. Now, okay, there are a few other tools that were remote administration tools that I know that admins used to use that became the malware developers or the hackers' tool of choice to try to hack the ad.
Yeah.
So, and you remember back then there used to be a hate and love relationship between admins and hackers. So when you really think about it, people they think it's advanced because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
And once you had a chance to look at it, you start breaking it down, you're like, oh, this is really nothing I couldn't probably done my own. Like Trojans, they used to be this magical thing. Then when you start really understanding them, you're like, oh, I could just make this. I could write this really quickly.
And all of that malware actually came from ideas taken from existing concepts and products that were already out there. Botnets that had existed for a very long time, just not in a malicious perspective. All a botnet really is a peer-to-peer or peerless or serverless system that was around long before botnets were. Ransomware, that's just encrypting your drive. That was around before ransomware was. It's just someone took that concept and said, hey, we can do damage with this. And that's a virus, so on and so forth. It doesn't matter which. That's all that really is.
But you know what's so funny? How long did it take them to do that? Like, I was thinking about ransomware a long time. And it's like, well, I wonder if somebody encrypts something. I remember I told you what happened a long time ago at one of the places I was at. So I was thinking about that stuff a long time ago. But that's not my thing. But I'm saying it. Look how long it took somebody to say, wonder what would have happened if I encrypted everybody's files.
Yeah.
And then told them, hey, you need to send me money to Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It was a concept that anybody could do because it's already been a thing. If you want to encrypt your own drive, you can encrypt your own stuff, or you want to encrypt your own file, you could do that. But somebody's now doing that to you.
Yeah.
And you gotta get the key in order to do it, to decrypt it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So all of this really goes back to the truth is we don't need to sensationalize our industry, and we don't need to sensationalize our findings. If you really want to make customers happy, and I say this as someone who works on all sides of this to include where people are giving me reports and vulnerability data, I want to cut straight to the chase. My management wants to cut to the chase even faster than I want to cut to the chase. My management wants less data than I do. I want you to tell me number one, what perspective, because that's important to me. I need to make certain, okay, well, he was way off his rocker. I don't care about benevolent users. Yes, benevolent users can be a problem. Those are users who accidentally find things because they typed input, or because they're just curious, or whatever it happens to be, there's no malice and they already have capabilities, or maybe because an application that they made screwed up, whatever it happens to be. There's no malice behind their actions. And you gave me a report that talks about how, oh, well, if an admin goes through and they start uploading 2,000 files at once, they can crash your system. Okay, well, for me, for whatever reason, I just don't care. Not for this particular system. That's the kind of stuff I need to know so that I can sit there, and when I read your report and read your findings, I can determine how much I care about it. Because if it turns out that you are way out in left field, I can go through and say, hey, I need you to redo this because this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what we had expected or what we had talked about. That should never happen. But at least I can contextualize the report and your findings. And then the only other thing I care about are the findings and how to resolve them. And if, this narrative, I don't care about a narrative, and I don't know anyone who does. Anywhere. I've never met someone who said, man, I read that narrative and it was just so great. I wish people put more of them in. The only thing I've ever seen and heard is people immediately skip over the narrative. They don't care. They go straight to the findings, or to the summary, or to the executive summary. It's all that they care about.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's been my experience, that I experience with anybody I talk to. A lot of times they don't care about all of the stuff that the company is trying to do for the client. A lot of times they don't care for that, like the start notifications, the end notifications. They don't care. They just want you to do your work, let them know you're done, and then give them the report. Mm-hmm. They want it as soon as possible so they can figure out how to fix these things, because a lot of times they're trying to release the product. They're in a release cycle, and they need to release their product, and they can't release it until they actually have, know what the issues are. So they don't really care about that. They just want to know what the findings are and then how to fix them. So people need to cut that crap out. You don't need an attack narrative to explain what you did. Right. You're already explaining that in your detailed finding.
Right.
Okay. If you want to have a finding summary, fine. Go over your little finding summary, saying everything that you found in writing, and then go and then explain it in detail. Okay. And in that way, they can kind of, go through, if the executives want to see what you found, they can read that, go through the finding summary and get a summarized, version of what you found. And then you can go, if they want to see, or they wanted to really, even though they're not more like technical, but if somebody wanted to go see the technical details, they can see that. They can see it broken down. I think that is a more functional and sufficient way of doing it than to do a full attack narrative. Mm-hmm. Still do an executive summary. Still say what they need to, some recommendation. It's just like you're just stuffing stuff in there, and I'm just like, this is just too much.
Right.
That was just the same thing I had told you, like I had said to you about people putting too much in their detail finding.
Right.
Where you have pictures, plus you have some code samples, then you have some reproduction steps and all this other crap. Like what?
Yeah.
You don't like, and they not see that through the picture? You're walking them through and telling them everything you did with your words and through the picture. And then you do a readout call and you're telling them that. But, right. A lot of companies, depending on, again, like you said, know your audience, a lot of companies may prefer both. A lot of companies may not prefer both. So it kind of goes either way, but having all of that just kind of, again, it just waters down your presentation.
It does. And what you really have to do is, number one, ask them. Number two, adjust your data based on what it is they want to see, but don't sit there and try to appeal. Don't try to appeal to everyone, because when you do, you will appeal to no one. Because if I saw a massive section for reproduction and it's got pictures, first of all, honestly, if it has a bunch of pictures, I'll probably be mad, because now I can't print it off, because it's going to waste a lot of ink and pages and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the document itself is going to be massive, from a bytes perspective, from a digital perspective, and from a printed out perspective. It's going to be, and most of it will be wasted space. It's fine if you have a picture or two, maybe for something that's complicated, where that picture is actually going to have some meaningful purpose. But I mean, picture. No, I don't want that. Give me steps, or give me a discussion, or point me to an example. I know my system well enough that if you give me an example, I can figure out what it is, what the pattern is. And that's the other big thing with these reports. Your report should not and cannot specify every single instance. It needs to specify an example that people can then use to find all other instances. Because if you're doing a penetration test, if you're doing a security assessment, if you've done a code review, if you've done whatever it happens to be, I promise you didn't find all instances of that thing. You only found an instance or a number of instances. But because of the complexities of almost any reasonable system out there, you probably only found a subset of those instances, and you just have to give people something that they can then search on. They can use to find all of these different instances. That's it. Give them their example and walk away.
And that's why you have the effective areas location, or most people say your endpoint. So you can list those the multitude of endpoints that you found that may be affected, but like you said, you're not going to find everything. You're not going to find every instance of that issue or vulnerability that you found. So I think being straight to the point, but thorough on your reporting is all you really need. I don't think you need all of this attack narrative, then finding summary, and then reproduction steps, and then pictures, and all. I mean, it's just too much. And for me, like I said, if I'm the client, I'm going to bypass all of that and get straight to the nitty gritty. I don't really want to see that. I don't care about none of that. It looks great and all, but to me, it's fluff. Get to the point. So again, that's my thought on this whole narrative situation, is that you don't really need an attack narrative to explain what you found.
I agree. And from another perspective, so if we're talking, and that takes care of penetration tests, it takes care of assessments, it takes care of code reviews, so on and so forth. From the perspective of other reports within our realm, let's say you were talking digital forensics or something like that, again, from a non-technical, you should be giving 2 reports. At least this is how I do it, and I would recommend everyone else as well. Frankly, I do 2 reports for my penetration tests, my security assessments, and all that other stuff as well. But I use LaTeX, so it's easy for me to make 2 reports. Unlike people who use something like Word, where you'd have to copy all that stuff over, I don't need to do that. I just go through, I make my report, and then do an include, or whatever it happens to be. But what I wind up doing is you have your title page, plain and simple, and then you have executive summary, any appendices that are relevant that an executive might want to see that quickly show some examples, and that's it. Then you have your technical report. And so you're talking usually a document that is 1 to 1.5, maybe 2 pages of summary. And then your appendices may go, depending on what the incident was, it could be 20 pages, it could be a little less, it can be a little more. Executives usually aren't going to look at that. Your technical report, that's where so you'll see, I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about those reports, but you'll see me routinely talk about how I write 1,800 page reports with great frequency. Those are the technical reports. And they're absolutely positively massive. And that's mostly because what I am dealing with tend to be very complex. Yes.
Complex systems.
They're very complex. Exactly. The system is complex. The attack was complex. The compromise, what was involved, is complicated. And then I have to have enough data that it can go to court. And so you'll see tons of information. That way, when you go to court, you can win your case. And I'll tell you, it's funny. I actually got asked, well, how many times have you, so when you do this kind of stuff, you're what's called an expert witness here in the United States. Well, how many times have you given testimony in court? And I said, well, I've given a lot of testimony, but those are in classified court systems. In outside of that context, so if you're talking about a more open, if you will, your standard courts, be they federal or otherwise, 0. And the reason is every single time I've done an digital forensics on a system, and we handed the report over to the other side, be it the prosecutor or the defense, case ended there. Either the prosecutor dropped it because they had nothing, meaning I was probably working for the defense, or the defense just folded because there was no defense. That's not tooting my horn. That's just saying when you have a very thorough report for something like that, because it's going to court, and really the explanation is usually less than 20 pages. The rest of the report is just all the evidence tied to the incident that shows definitively who it was or what occurred and that kind of stuff. So of that 1,800 plus pages on average for the forensics report, really 20 pages are what most people read. And then beyond that, it's just, okay, well, here's exactly how we know it was you, and it's over. That's it. So even in a complicated case, and when I'm talking complicated, I'm talking about cases like, I had one, this was organized crime. It involved the Hungarian mob. It was a bad relationship. It broke up between this guy who turned out to be a leader in the Hungarian mob over here in this area. He went through and claimed that she was threatening him and extorting him and all this other stuff, and then handed the police a letter supposedly from her, this extortion letter. The cops came, took her computer. They had notified him before they were going to go get her computer. So I guess he had one of his buddies in Hungary take a Word document that he had created to make this letter and drop it on her computer. So they compromised her computer, logged into a Yahoo email account, downloaded the malicious, I say malicious file, the extortion letter onto her computer. Police came, took the computer, said, there it is. There's the extortion letter. You did it. I wound up looking at it, said, no, this computer's been compromised. Here's where the data came from. They tried to wipe the system clean and all this other stuff. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about complicated. So this is international. It's people from organized crime, in this case, came into the system after compromising the system. They had to infect the system to do this. They dropped in the evidence, and then they tried to clean house and walk away after purging everything. So I have to recover everything that was removed. I have to definitively tie it to IP addresses. I'm tracking down through all the routers and their history and all this other stuff, all the connection status, and ultimately tie it back to this guy. Point blank, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It didn't go anywhere, by the way. What wound up happening in this case was the police, being police, or I should say, really, it wasn't the police. The prosecutor, being a prosecutor, decided to get her on a misdemeanor for lying. She said something in her testimony that was wrong. I don't even know what it was because I wasn't part of it and I don't care. So he went after her for that and never went after the guy who did all of this bad stuff, even though he had a mountain of evidence to be able to go after the guy. But the government had to drop their case against her for extortion. They didn't contest it any further. And this was after the state police had already gone through and looked at the system. And I sat there and I looked at it and I pointed out this system's been compromised. I mean, that was one of the first things that came up. I was like, guys, this system's been compromised. You can't take any evidence from here. And that shocked the state because they didn't do their job. I don't know why. They didn't do their job and didn't see that that's what had happened. I don't know who it was. I'm not disparaging everyone. I'm just disparaging the individual in question, whomsoever it was who had looked at the system. And that's what I mean when I say a complex system. And actually, all my cases wind up being complex on the forensic side. The penetration testing side, the software side tends to be government systems. Those also tend to be like your weapons platforms and things of that nature. They tend to be complex as well, just because of the nature of them. But again, those reports aren't big either. I mean, you've seen my reports tend to be small. They tend to be small. The only thing that's big is the forensics, and that's only because the appendices. It's only because you have to have a lot of data to really get someone in court. Other than that, it's very straightforward, very basic. That's a good report. I think it's important to remember, though, tied to all of this, you know, you and I, we have to be able to write in order to do what it is we love to do. I don't know if you enjoy writing reports or not. I'll tell you, I don't. Yeah.
No, that's when I tell people, they like, do you get to hack things? You're a hacker? And I say, no, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't really spend a lot of time hacking. It may seem like it, but to me, I feel like I spend 90% of my time writing, and what you want to say, like maybe 10% of the time actually hacking.
Yeah.
Because everything is about the report. The
Yeah.
report is the meat. You know, that's what they're paying you for, the report, to give the remediation, find a vulnerability, but give a remediation. And so they can have a report, not only to fix the things, but to say that they did due diligence by getting that service. So, yeah, that is something I don't enjoy, but it pays the bill. So
that's exactly right.
Part of our job.
That's exactly right.
So with that being said, number one, learn to be a good reporter, good writer. Number two, stop with the fluff. You don't have to fluff your reports to prove a point. And number three, be good at actually remediating the findings, and not only, you know, selling your findings, but if you want to sell your findings, you also have to be able to, you know, sell the remediation, and having the creativity or being able to think outside the box on different ways that you can help a customer find a solution. There are always multitude of ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Right. So having multiple solutions for a client can take you a long way. And I think that's very important when it comes to this field and when it comes to actually presenting your report.
Definitely. That's where the skill is. The skill is being able to explain what you did, how you did it in a succinct manner, and being able to go through and tell them how to fix it. Even when they have roadblocks in your way, like, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. You have to have different ways to go about it. And that's where the real skill is. And that really separates your good from your bad.
Yeah. It's not only just having the skill to hack things, but that's a very important thing.
It's honestly even more important than being able to compromise it or whatever, find vulnerabilities. Just being able to actually fix it. Because finding vulnerabilities is the easy part. Being able to fix them and explain how to fix them, especially, as you know, given the complexities of what it is we're looking at, the fact that there are so many different operating systems and languages and CPUs and so on and so forth, and it all plays a role in it.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I am Roniel.
I am DaRon.
And thank you guys for watching this episode of the Roniel and DaRon podcast show. If you haven't already, please subscribe and also like and comment. We love comments too.
We do. Thank you.
Until the next time.
Have a fantastic day. Or recommendations. Well, Was that the cat or was that something else this time?
Yes, literally. He's trying to get in this box. And I'm like, if you don't get away from my box, man.
It's his
And
box.
he will not stop. The cat knows something we don't.
Yes, it does.